Unbiased, uncensored, this is the AO podcast. We're discussing real issues and getting the off-the-cuff thoughts from real people. It's raw honesty from the mouths that matter. Let the protest begin. So we have a panel of 5 people. I'm Tamara, gin enthusiast.
Love it.
I'm Nazina, strictly paleo.
Slash bad lover.
Everyone, I'm Ellie. I'm one of those people that likes to scream to rock music in her car, and my favourite animal is a bunny rabbit.
I'm Matthew, and in the closet emo is somehow running a company.
The next Bill Gates.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I'm Kate, trend forecaster and punk light.
Not punk light.
0 calories.
You need to copyright that or what's
Yeah,
trademark
that's great.
it.
I'd like it on a
it.
t-shirt, like with
that's
Coca-Cola
great.
label.
Fashion, I mean, that's what it's all about.
2017.
So, welcome all to the AO podcast series. Over the next few weeks, we'll be really delving into the realm of protest fashion and talking about people's identities, how that relates to their fashion and their own personal protest, and then how this translates to the masses, considering subcultures and their place in today's modern online society. So, to kickstart this series, we're going straight into the theme of identity and how this relates to social rules, social norms, and our own personal protest against these. So let's begin with finding out how you guys actually identify yourselves. Do you think other people perceive you the way you want them to? Or are you even bothered about how other people perceive you? So
Such a
Nazina.
tough question. I knew you were going to do that.
Such a straight head.
It's not the easiest question. You have to pause and think, okay, so what is my identity? I think, the sort of basic structures that form your identity of, colour, age, sex, whatever, religion. But for me, as I've gotten older, I think it's just changed. I'm talking about my identity, obviously. And also the sort of importance that I place on morals and values and beliefs, my views on politics, economics, etc. All those things actually mean a lot more to me than the more superficial layers of my identity, my personal identity. To be fair, I don't really care. As I've gotten older, I don't care what people think about me. I really, really don't. And it's incredibly liberating. It's incredibly empowering. And I think that's just how I kind of live my life. It's just through being able to express myself in the most freest and sort of liberal way possible without being sort of tied down to my personal identity and how people are going to perceive me. But I mean, is that the same for everyone else? Or how does everyone else sort of feel when it comes to how people sort of judge and perceive you, or sort of how you then communicate what you want people to perceive about yourself?
No, it's quite, I think how you said how it's constraining. I think even regardless of if you give, any damn about what people think of you or not, people still do think of you in a certain way, and then they will not judge but kind of interact with you accordingly of how they think. And I feel that is it's a massive limitation, because even if you give off kind of a certain vibe per se of how you think you are, but if people kind of interpret that differently, then they will then judge you accordingly from that. And I think it's limiting, because, I don't know, for example, so take me, you're like fairly well spoken. People instantly kind of assume that you come from a good
certain
background,
right?
you have that
Right.
upbringing,
Right.
you have that lifestyle, and then, based on where you live, and it's like, oh, okay, you're that sort of person, but you're not, and that's not who you are, and it's hard to move on from that.
So how would you define who you are? How do you see yourself if those things that people obviously pick up on or perceive you as sort of coming from a certain place, if that's not what you want to be necessarily identified by, what is it that you would prefer for people to sort of see you?
Yeah, see me as, I guess, as someone, okay, so someone who studies at a fashion uni and is also, blonde as well. You same with Ellie here.
Yeah.
People instantly think two blondes studying fashion. I mean, what do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah.
I get quite offended and affronted when people assume that you're a bit shallow or that you're not that clever. As soon as they kind of hear the words LCF, they kind of almost shut down because they're like, oh, okay, you're that sort of girl. And I can say this for both of us, we're not. We are educated. We are clued up on so many things in this world. So that's it. That kind of assumption. And it's hard to break through that because you also feel like, why should I be justifying myself? Why should I be telling you, oh no, this is who I am? Again, it's like if you don't really care, then you don't even feel the need to do that.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because now you've said it, I think the other one of the first questions someone will ask you is, where are you from? And really, I am from Essex, but I don't ever say that. I always say Cambridge because
interesting. Okay.
There's such a assumption and a stereotype around that. It's interesting because my mum's side of the family have lived there for years, and obviously, I think what Essex was in their day is not the same as now. And so before there was, you said Essex and you just thought agriculture, really. It was like a huge area for growing wheat. You didn't get any of the stuff that you get now that I think is kind of connected to what Tamara was saying. But I think that's been more thought about recently because I saw it on This Morning recently and discussing should that stereotype be broken down. I think it is, but then it's one of those things where you've also got to think, you might not conform or be part of that stereotype. It exists for a reason. You kind of, as much as you don't want to be part of it, you can't ignore the fact that there are people out there like that and they have constructed it. At the same time, I can understand where the assumptions have come from. And I think perhaps it's more on the people that have created it to fix it than the people that assume you're like that.
And then, thinking about, again, how if we care what other people think of us as well, I quite often think of myself as like very uncaring, being like, I don't care what you think of me, like I know who I am. But then at the same time, I'm contradicting myself because I'm not telling people I'm from Essex because I don't want them to think of me as like an Essex girl.
And is there a reason why? I mean, no disrespect to obviously anyone who does come from Essex. We love Essex. We love people from Essex.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's interesting what you say. Explain a little bit why you don't want people to have that assumption.
Because, again, it's the whole...
Shallow.
it's the whole shallow, the uneducated. It's...
Sexually promiscuous is the dictionary definition. That is what the Oxford Dictionary says.
No way.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my God.
Because they've said it. And I was like, wow.
Well,
And I'm not, I'm Catholic. That's what's so ironic about it.
God.
It's like, guys, seriously.
Okay. Interesting. So you just try to, in a way, deviate from from
I
that
don't want to be, you don't want to be part of that. And then it's which kind of, areas are deemed good, which are deemed bad. And it's kind of, regardless of if we care or not, there are, and you can't deny it, there are good places to come from, there are good areas to live, good things to go to, and there are not so good places to come from. And it's hard to, I think, because it's so widely, not normal per se, but just kind of accepted that even if you want to not care about it, kind of brought up from that, like, early age to care about it. Like, if someone is from this area, that's not a good area, and therefore they are that kind of person.
Do you know why, though? I think it's because obviously the world is becoming incredibly competitive. And I think it's because we all want to try and strive ahead. We all want to try and get ahead of the person next to us. And I think the more it's important for us to obviously wear the right hat and be perceived to have come from the right background in order to get ahead. What that for me does is that it creates, later on in years, you end up sort of questioning, or you do sort of self-reevaluation and you think, okay, but that's not who I am. And that's pretty much the stage I'm at. Not that I felt necessarily that I've had to sort of change or sort of hide where it is that I've come from or who I am, but it's more about, well, actually, now I'm just incredibly comfortable and I almost celebrate what it is that I'm communicating to the rest of the world. And I don't feel that I need to communicate my social class. I don't feel I need to communicate where I'm from in order to get ahead. I just feel as though accept me for who I am. In a way, that's a form of protest because you're not.
It's like in your day-to-day life, you're kind of just passively going against kind of social norm. But then also kind of that poses a question, do people actively go against these social norms? Like, for example, I know it's so tiny, but everyone assumes, Londoners aren't happy, no one's very nice. I actively smile at people on the tube. I'm like that person that's like, oh, hi, good morning. I just so don't want to be that angry Londoner. I'm like, that's not me. I'm never like angry and depressed.
I feel like my observation on this is, I guess from where I'm from, like obviously like in New York or America, I feel like in England, a lot of my friends here are not like proud of where they're from, or like they'll be like, I'm not from this town, I'm from here. Like we have a friend that's from up north and they won't say they're from this town, but they'll be like, oh, I'm from Manchester, or like instead of saying I'm from insert small town that if I say she'll know who I'm talking about. But like, and I think that it's weird because I feel like a lot of my English friends here, what they're born into is what they feel like they have to settle for. Whereas back home, if you're from the Bronx or from like Park Avenue, we like wear it proudly. And I think that, I don't know, it's always something that I never thought about until I came here. Like I never knew anyone that was unhappy with where they came from back home. Like obviously, like especially Queens, where it's just like a melting pot for like immigrants and like minorities. It was, I don't know, even they came from nothing and they were still like completely proud of where they're from. Whereas like here, I feel
like in New York, not just in New York, like America, you celebrate where you are now, and you celebrate the present version of yourself. Whereas I think very much in the UK, it's, you're celebrated where you are now, but it's also judged upon where,
It's the effects of the class system. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely still feel them here.
Yeah,
as
I
much
do
as they say they're diminished.
Like London in specific, or like most cities in the UK, have this very strong class system that back home I don't feel like for example, there's a really good documentary called Park Avenue or something, and it talks about how like you've got Park Avenue, which is home to the most billionaires in the world. This one avenue, but if you go all the way down to Harlem, it's like the poorest part of New York. We don't have that solid divide of like rich and poor, whereas in the UK or in London, you can tell like this area is very wealthy. You take the train one stop, it's very poor. And I think that that's something that doesn't really help the whole like mashing that stereotype and like making people comfortable, which is something I think it can make you feel very like isolated in London, where you'll feel like a certain area is not you. And I think it's really hard for people, I guess I'm not sure about you guys, but like being international, it was really hard to find like your place in London. Whereas in New York, I know that like we would have like typical like Soho kids that were like growing up in like penthouses, hanging out with kids like us that were just from Queens, and like, and I feel like in London that's not how it is.
You hang around with your niche, your kind of your people, and even if you go to different areas and you're not from that area, and that area is not, the people there are not who you would hang around with, you do not fit in. Like there's such divide, postcode envy, and everything like that. And it's ridiculous. It's such a small area. There is so much stigma about your location and how that relates to your identity. And I mean, you see it on things like BuzzFeed all the time on Facebook, and it's like the people summed up in like each area in London, and it's like I saw one of them, and they kind of just did like key areas like Peckham, Brixton, Clapham, like West London. And they literally just completely stereotyped each kind of person from each place, and it was like Clapham, these are like a rugby lad and then a girl with like a big jumper on, they're just here for a good time. And then they said West London, and then it was awful, and it was like holding Aperol spritz, probably with like a bit of white underneath their nose. And it's like, God, that's not a stereotype that you want to live up to. That's not an identity.
Even with just you just explaining that, it just makes me feel like, what the hell is going on? It makes me feel like breaking free. Seriously, I think that's just taking it too far, and it's such an extreme. But again, it's one of those harsh realities of life where we do often do that. And I think sometimes we do it it's a form of like survival as well. We like to put people in boxes. It's a form of like being able to, process our environment.
Understand people.
Absolutely. But I just think by doing that, what you end up doing to yourself is restricting yourself, taking away your empowerment, you're taking away your individuality, you're taking away your uniqueness, the things that make up who you are. And also it masks who you are, so everyone ends up just sort of wanting to sort of aspire towards being, like a shaped bit of cast out identity that's not them. I don't know. I don't really social media a lot, but I do kind of feel that there is this emphasis on portraying an identity that's not necessarily yours. It's like hijacking
Well, I mean,
identity.
it's the complete common. It's like the known thing. It's like no one is their Instagram self. Like
Yeah.
no one, no one. I'm not my Instagram self. Like,
But why? I mean, I understand why, but how does that make you feel? Or I'm not saying that you guys do it, but I'm just trying to sort of get into the minds of those that do. Over a period of time, you're lying to yourself. You're like,
I feel like it's not to say that I support it, but I feel like it's one of those fine lines where it's between when you're pretending to be someone, when you're aspiring to be someone. It's like maybe that like where they're from or who they are is not who they want to be. And I think that like through these little steps, it's like trying to justify it at least. Like, that's what they do. Like they aspire to be this person, and if this is their way to getting it. I mean, like for example, let's say you have someone that wants to be like quote unquote successful and things like that. Like through portraying that, it sort of surrounds them with, not that it's the good people or the bad people, but it surrounds them with people that have the same mindset as them.
Right.
Like they're hanging out in the same places. And I think that like it is really hard to tell when someone's doing it to be cool, if they're doing it because that's honestly who they want to be. And I mean, like if that's who they want to be, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, you don't want to
know.
judge. Kate, I'm going to also ask you, in terms of the whole sort of grand scheme of identity, is there anything that you've felt in the past that you kind of had to redefine, or you've tried to protest almost?
I think it's been weird for me because I've never really been bothered at all about what people thought of me, even when I was quite young. But when somebody has learnt something about me and it's kind of come back at you in some way and you realise how they perceive you, that's been quite a shock. It's not something I particularly thought about. And when it's been raised, I usually say, people ask me where I'm from, I say I'm from London. I'm actually from Cornwall, but a surprising number of people don't know where that is, and it just saves time.
yeah, exactly.
So it's just easier. So I just get London. And oh my god. Yeah, but then it suddenly sort of came up when I went to university, fashion uni, kind of quite high pressured, like you said, getting very competitive. And I was told to go back to the country where I belonged.
Oh boy.
And it was just like, wow, I didn't know I belonged because I wasn't, you know, from London, and that kind of got thrown back at you and also because I wasn't kind of into the very competitive side of it. I kind of wouldn't engage with that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a strength, though. Do you know
definitely.
what I mean? I think if you're so focused on getting to the front of the queue, you kind of forget what the thing at the front of the queue is that everybody's fighting for, if that makes sense.
And by the time you get to the front of the queue, it probably wasn't the thing that you wanted.
It doesn't look the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then with these groups and identities, I mean, are there any that you, because obviously like Matthew, you said kind of, you know, who you aspire to be. Are there groups that you aspire to be into and you aspire to be associated with? Are there any positive sides to, not, you know, stereotypes?
I don't know. I think like-minded people, really, those that kind of have the same importance or show the same importance, the sort of values or shared values that you have. I think that's it. It doesn't matter who you are, like where you come from, what age you are, what gender you are, just as long as we we gravitate along the same level, you know, that's pretty much how I'd like to be, that's how I would conduct my sort of social surroundings. But again, I find it quite interesting how people are also very geared towards strategic liaisons with people. They like to be associated, as you quite rightly said, with either a person or with either group of people, because it reflects better upon them. Very interesting. You know, you see it, you acknowledge it. I mean, I don't want to judge it. At the same time, I kind of realise that that's another key way of people sort of entering into groups that they want to be associated with. I think it's just to get ahead.
Because again, I mean, the groups, and they're not tangible. If you kind of fly through life on your associations with things, and that's how you get kind of self-gratification upon what you are labelled as and what you are attached to, you know, do you really ever actually achieve things, or not achieve things, but like if you strip away that, then how do you really identify yourself if it's purely with your kind of affiliations?
Absolutely. That's where I think people often end up in problems. They spend so much time and they concentrate so much on efforts that are geared towards obviously them aspiring towards being something that they're not, that they forget who they are truly, and they get lost, and then they go through identity crisis, you know.
Well, the thing is though. I mean, identity crisis is like a thing now for early 20s. It's like your quarter life crisis.
I've seen so many things with that hashtag.
So many things, quarter life crisis. Like the early 20s, they say now. I was reading some sort of study and I can't remember what, but they were saying that's the age which people get so confused with life. You know, kind of historically, it's been like you grow up, you do something, you know, you get a job, get some money, and this is how you go through life. But then with these, I think people are questioning, why is that the norm? You know, why is that the social norm? Why can't I do these other things? And then therefore you get kind of caught. It's a bit like a catch-22. You want to break away from that. Okay, but then now I've got this endless possibility. What? Where do I go from here?
People are doing it early. Because I think there's definitely going to be people that still, you know, leave school 16, 18, go into full-time employment, and then by the time they get to 40, they're like, where is that thing in my life? And that's when the sports car comes in. But I think people are realising now that they don't want to get to 40 and do it. I think it is almost, I kind of see the quarter life crisis as a positive thing, weirdly, because it's like everybody at some point is going to have to figure out a little bit of who are you, what do you want? Otherwise you're going to get in a conflict. And it's like, if you can figure that out in kind of a safe zone where you're still an adolescent, I guess society still gives you a bit more permission to make mistakes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe that is a little bit better than waiting till 40 or 50.
Absolutely.
Because then, that's where the sports cars come in, because all you've got to do to express yourself is all that money you've earned doing what you hate.
This is my gripe with society. It's like we need to stop sort of encouraging people to sort of aspire towards a normal, some sort of like mediocre level where they forget actually their unique and innate abilities to actually supersede and become incredibly successful in their own rights, you know, using their own sort of, you know, resources, etc. That for me is a healthier outlook. And I just don't understand why education doesn't promote that. It promotes, you know, pigeonholing. It promotes, you know, jobs that come in very sort of rigid packages and boxes. That's what it promotes. And so, the quarter life crisis happens when people literally do wake up. They say, actually, you know, that's not me. That's not what I want to aspire towards. Yes, it makes sense. Yes, parents want me to do this because, you know, whatever, it will secure whatever future, but that it won't make me happy.
Yeah.
And I just kind of feel like it's society that's creating this sort of norm, this social construct, which stops people from actually reflecting and saying, no, this is what I want. This is who I am, and this is what I'm going to achieve, and this is how I'm going to get it.
I think like this sort of younger generation, which I'm still just about creeping into, is kind of lucky in a way, because like for my parents, you had a very set idea of what you did. You finished school, you went to university or got a job, then you got married, bought a house, had X, Y, and Z kids, and then got to like 55 and had a monstrous freak out. Whereas like for like us, with economics dictates that a lot of us are not going to have those things. The house might actually be a pipe dream. You're going to be renting forever and stuff. And that, you know, that's quite difficult, because for your parents, that's kind of how they brought you up. That's not going to happen now. So you're kind of in a bit of limbo of, well, what do I do? Because everything I grew up thinking was going to happen is not going to happen. Yeah. But at the same time, like sort of quarter life crisis.
Is that kind of life that's so set out for you and so set out for everyone, and been like, you get your job, you get a promotion at 30, you get married, and you have some kids at 35, and it's just like, now we've do you really care?
Yeah.
Like, is that really?
Yeah, now we've got the opportunity. To change things much earlier, to think I'm just going to walk out of my job and I'm going to go this, I'm going to go travelling, I'm going to do that, and you're not confined to that anymore. So it's kind of, I mean, there are some negatives to it, but I think mostly it's a positive thing, because you get to sort of not reinvent yourself, but change your life how you need to without having that kind of pressure of that's what you do.
That is a form of protest. And I think that's what makes that moment in your life so incredibly valuable, because you do start to sort of think, actually, this is not what I want. This is what I want.
I
think the only thing about being in my 30s is I'm
high five.
I say in my 30s, I'm actually creeping out of my 30s. I suppose I'm in the slightly bit of limbo that we, you know, it did get much more drummed in about that's how your life is going to go. And not necessarily wanting that, but kind of not really thinking about it. And now, you know, jobs change, jobs are not guaranteed anymore. You know, I've lost my job before. And then not really knowing what to do because the previous generation have not really experienced that.
I think almost that whole kind of turning 50, not really knowing and being like, actually, I'm going to now do what I want to do. And it's become and that's become a social norm. A friend of mine was saying a while ago now, and he said it completely as a joke, but he was like, oh, I'm just going to kind of do like, he's at a good uni now, he's like, going to do a city job. He was like, going to do a city job, and then when I turn like 50, I'm just going to quit it all and then just start a hotel. And then we were joking how, you know, he's going to be like the equivalent of like the W hotels, like all down like east coast of England. And then I kind of jokingly said after, and I was like, well, if that's what you want to do, like, do it now.
Do it,
Go into the hotel industry now. And he was like, oh, no, but there's something a bit more special about, you know, like grinding through and then hitting that 50 mark and then being like, what am I doing with my life? And then doing what you actually want to do. And it's weird because...
It's interesting.
That's what makes the Telegraph
it's
magazine
like,
article
you know
story.
already,
I broke out at 50 of the
that
city.
you don't want to do it. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but, you know, that's what people do. They, you know, grind through life, they go through it, and then they do what they want to do. And it was like, that's normal, no? That's what we do.
But I feel like it's the whole thing where even though you're saying that, like, it's a really good thing that people at a young age are figuring out what they want to do, it's also super pressuring because now that it's not the norm to just go to school, I have friends that are stressing out. That's like, I need to start a startup. I need to do this. I need to do this. Like, I'm 20. I think that it's really hard because I have, like, from experience, I have people very close to me that have done it all by 22, 23, retired at 25, and now they're like,
what do they do?
They're like, I followed my dreams. And then I think everyone hits that point where you realize you can be living the dream life, but the sad reality is you're going to hit that point one day when you're like, okay, what's next? And I think that it's really hard. And I think that that's why I kind of do admire the like 9-to-5 grind where it's like you did this, you saved up, and then once you got comfortable, you sort of dabbled into something and did that. Even though it's really great that kids are doing things at a younger age, you also need to realize that it's also okay to not do it at a younger age. For example, Warren Buffett made like 99% of his wealth after 50. Like the guy from McDonald's became wealthy after 50.
Absolutely.
Like I think that, like, obviously I say this, but then I'm being hypocritical because I'm the one that's like, I'm going to do everything at like 14. I like registered a company at 14. And then I registered another one at 16, registered one. So I think like it's hard for me to say, but I think that I do admire the people that are like, I'm just going to take life as it is.
Well, it's like Natalie Massenet as well. You know, she did every job under the sun. Then, you know, she was with child and was like, oh, actually, no, I think Net-a-Porter might be a good idea. I think I could do this. And she's lived life, and then she's made this massive empire, and, you know, and then she moves on and does what she wants to do with her life now.
Absolutely.
But again, it's like, as you said, it's people who kind of have done... that they've lived beforehand and they've kind of enjoyed things, and then they've kind of gotten down to the grind and been like, okay, now it's time to be serious. Which is, because like you said, Matthew, it's like there's so much pressure now to be successful ASAP. You know, it's like, because you have all these opportunities, because nothing is laid out for you now need to choose what you want to do and then do it and get to that success point as quick as possible because other people are doing it. And it's almost like a different form of the rat race. I mean, it's funny because it's like our generation has tried so hard to not be that 9-to-5 grind, but we've ended up in the exact same situation.
Exactly.
If anything, more pressurizing.
And I think that's where the identity and the whole sort of like trying to create this, that's the importance, because we're all striving towards that, or at least your generation are.
Yeah.
And we want that. Now there's this instant gratification for it, so we'll do anything.
And I think that whole instant gratification, that's another point. It's like so much in life we do for instant gratification. I mean, things like, even like with social media and like Instagram, you do it, people get addicted to it for instant gratification because it's all now and it's all like present. And I think it's hard because sometimes it
the older generation complain that the older generation complain that it's like they feel like younger people aren't in it for the long haul. You know, obviously divorce rates have gone up, and I feel like maybe that's why. I don't want to say obviously that all young people are like this, but sometimes you do get the feeling that because there's like been a shift, I'm going to say the word politics, there's been a shift and people feel like they're out of control of their lives and what's going on. People just get on the streets and protest about stuff they don't even know about. Like I've said to you, it's like like when we've looked at the numbers of people that have associated themselves to certain things, I think the Women's March in America, I'm sorry, I'm going to say that one, I really don't honestly believe all the people in that march were fully dedicated to that cause.
But again,
I don't think they were. They just want to protest. They want to have a scream.
It's associating with that group.
Yeah,
because,
they are.
You know,
I think they just wanted to, I guess, just want to do that. It's like as much as everybody, it's kind of ironic because as much as you had figures there, like, you know, Madonna that were breaking social norms and all of that, you've then got hundreds of people that are craving to be part of something. As much as people want to be able to do what they want to do and follow their innate sense of direction, it's a scary idea following that road when you realise you might be the only one on it for a while. People want to come back to a group. Like I said, I think sometimes people feel like something's wrong in the world and you can't quite put your finger on it, and you know it's affecting your life, and so you're just going to have a rant on Twitter or you're going to join a protest because you can't make the change that you want to see. You don't. And I feel like that was what you were talking about, saying that that's where protest comes from. It's people that don't have the job. Not everybody's a freaking senator or an MP. Do you know, what else can you do when you feel like there's something wrong?
Absolutely.